Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. My goal is to not bore you to death over the next hour and 15 minutes. So I'll ask you at the very end if I was successful. I am going to try my best not to read off of the slides, but as I was thinking of a title for this presentation, this agenda, you can see it as pretty long-winded, rethinking the relationship between brand, CAPEX, and OPEX. I am not an accountant. In fact, last year at CFMA, I think I learned what the word reconcile meant. It's pretty bad. And that's not a joke. It's kind of true. It's just not who I am. But I do want to talk about the relationship between capital expenditures, operational expenditures, as it pertains to this word brand that we throw around all of the time. We use this word and we don't even know what that means. We have no idea what the impact is on what we can charge. We have no idea, in my opinion, this is the thesis, and we're going to see it in a minute, is if we build a strong brand, we don't have to deduct it from the bottom line. It will actually support the bottom line and lift it. And I'm going to give some examples. So I'm going to go into a 5-minute introduction about who we are, and then we'll go into the rest of the presentation, just so that you understand where we're coming from. My name is Mike. I run TDC Marketing, and we are a team of 24 going on 25 employees located in Harrisonburg, Virginia. And, oh wait, I'm sorry, the most important part is that we have an office dog, because what marketing company doesn't have an office dog? And we have clients all over the place. We work with for-profits, nonprofits, and government. For-profits are the bread and butter of what we do. And specifically, about 20% of our clients operate in the construction space, whether they're GCs, subcontractors, residential, or even AGC of Greater Florida, a membership organization. We work all over I shouldn't say all over the country. You can see we put a little heat map there to show you where we work. We might be based in Harrisonburg, but we work all over the place. And we have a good time doing it. So let me see if I can explain in 60 seconds how it is that we operate, because that kind of relates to the whole rest of the presentation. So I'm going to hit play. It's going to be fast. I might have to go very, very quickly. But what happens is typically a client will come to us and says, I need a website or I need videos or photos. Well, what they're really lacking is the why. They know what they want to do, but they don't have their North Star figured out. We come in and help strategically figure out what that is, kind of what JW was just talking about. We put together an integrated marketing plan, and then we have a team that is able to execute it. Because what we learn over our years of doing this is that our clients typically have the budget for a marketing coordinator, but the responsibilities for what they're actually trying to accomplish go far beyond what a coordinator could do. So they have the budget for it, so they need to split it across an entire team. And then our overall goal at the very end is to constantly improve, always measure, always be reporting back on performance, and always be pushing the ball forward, because business development goals change, recruitment goals change, territories change, acquisitions change. We need to make sure that the strategy continues to get updated. That's us in a nutshell. So now, with the presentation, I was going to say this is our executive summary of what we're going to be talking about today. I want to, now that I've admitted I'm not a finance person, right, I've confessed that, I want to bridge the two worlds together. I want to talk about marketing and finance at the exact same time. I know it's not normal, right? I want to demonstrate that strong brands have a measurable and positive impact on a company's financial performance. I want to do a little workshop. I want to go through a little bit of a workshop, which is in regards to positioning and category design. Positioning is a word that is often misused as well as brand. And positioning is who we are in relation to our competitors. And we're going to walk through 5 questions, and I'm going to ask you all to rate yourselves for your organization as it pertains to positioning, because you cannot build a strong brand without a unique position. If I make my point properly, I believe, even though you're going to see it's a little bit split, that this thing that is marketing and branding is really a capital expense, not an operational expense. Still can't put it on your taxes as a capital expense, but I want to rethink that relationship. Here's our assumption. Marketing and branding expenses are unnecessary and subtract from the bottom line. That is the assumption that almost everybody we work with at first is working on. It is a minus sign. I am trying to say, I want us to look at that closely and evaluate whether or not that's true. So, I'm probably speaking to people who know this already, but I will try and keep my comments very, very brief. So, capital expenditures versus operational. Now, I can nearly guarantee that everybody in the room, if you're finance-minded, are probably prioritizing the bottom two on the column, on these rows, the accounting and the tax treatment. So, capital expenses, as we all know, just very succinctly, are about long-term investments. That's what you're doing. You are thinking way longer than this calendar year. Operational expenses, day to day, month to month, year to year. That's it. Short-term versus long-term. And I would like to say, where does building and maintaining a brand fit between these two? And if I am successful in making my case, making my argument, I would venture to say that almost everybody in the room believes that it is on the far right column. Everything to do with marketing and branding is on the far right. And we're going to come back to this a little bit later, and we're going to see that it's pretty close to split, but it's how we prioritize those that makes our point, whether it should be viewed and felt like a capital expenditure versus operational. So, couple of things that we have to start with. Marketing, we have to define what marketing actually is. And the most important thing I can tell you, if you walk away learning anything today, it is that marketing is not advertising. This is one of those old, all squares are rectangles, but not all rectangles are squares. Everybody that I meet at first thinks that advertising is the way that we market. And they go, well, we put a billboard, we did Google ads, that's why I put Times Square here, because it's sort of the advertising mecca. Yes, advertising is a component to a pretty healthy marketing stack, but no, it is not in and of itself a marketing strategy. That is not your marketing plan. It is one tiny little sliver. Marketing is, as the way I define it, has three components: communicating your position with your audience. And the reason that those three things are bolded and italic is because each one of those can be broken down into basically college-level courses on communicating, positioning, and understanding your audience. When we're talking about advertising, we are talking about communicating your position with your audience, and you've chosen to do it on the billboard in Times Square for a very specific reason. That is not the only way to do things. I would like to define the word brand very quickly. This is another one of these things that we could talk for hours about. But my definition of a brand is a series of rational and irrational associations built over a long period of time. Now, Jeff Bezos, I'm not sure if you've ever heard that name, he said it a lot better than me, which was, your brand is what other people say about you when you're not in the room. Now, that's pretty powerful. It's probably why he has a couple extra $1 billion than I do, because he's able to package these thoughts together very, very clearly. I will say I should change that a little bit. Your brand is how people feel about you when you're not in the room. The other thing that I would like you to walk away with today, as I said, marketing is not advertising, but the second thing is, when you throw around the word brand, please understand you're talking about a feeling. Brand is a feeling. How you feel about that logo, which we're going to come back to later, is very different than how I feel or the person next to you feels. It's not the logo. It's how you feel about the logo. And speaking about feelings, I don't know if this is that bold of a statement, but feelings seem to impact our behavior. They actually impact what we do and don't buy, and who we do and don't recommend to others, specifically in our field, the relationships that we have. When the phone rings and you see someone's name and you choose not to pick it up, that's their brand, okay? So now we're going to move into a little bit of an example here, all right? So I'm going to talk about measurable ROI as it pertains to brand, because I do want to prove my point. So if a GC chooses you over a competitor who bid 5% lower when all things are equal, you have a demonstrable 5% ROI on your brand. Now, getting into the specifics on that, we all know the calculus behind what ROI is. I gave two different practical examples. We can calculate ROI by saying this dozer did this, calculated comparing saving the hours at a specific hourly rate against the initial cost of the machine. We can input some numbers and say the ROI on that machine was $10,000. Same thing with workforce development program. If a company can say, I put $10,000 worth of our company money into a workforce development program, I got 3 employees that stayed an average of 5 years, and my net profit per employee is X, I can justify my workforce development program from an ROI perspective. So let's go back to our example. If the task was to install a TPO roof over 20,000 square feet, JW will have to correct my pricing. Is this a little low? Competitor A is $200,000, B is $190,000, competitor C is $210,000, 5% more. If competitors A, B, and C all have the same capabilities, approaches, level of competency, and warranties, why in the world would anybody pay 5% more? Wouldn't that be just a dumb move? Well, the answer is, in this hypothetical example, because competitor C is a stronger brand, they are able to instill a feeling, and I'm going to give 3 examples of what they could be, that their customer cares more about. It could be trust, that the job will actually be done correctly. It could be confidence that they're actually going to stay on schedule, because we all know time is important. Satisfaction, that they strengthen the right relationship. Those are just 3 examples. The list is sort of endless. But the simple fact of the matter is, if all things were equal, why would anybody pay more? Here's the all things being equal statement. Great brands are not built on things being equal at all. And that is what we're going to call positioning. So they're built on being different, who we are in relation to our competitors. Now, I realize we need a little bit more direction than just that statement, so we're going to come back to that in a few minutes. I'm going to give 3 examples, and then we're going to talk about our own positioning. As I said, Apple, that logo. Positioning is very, very important. Premium quality and design versus standard quality and design. Simplicity versus complexity, and another thing that Apple stands for, which is the integrated ecosystem versus the choose your own adventure. Notice, there are probably people who use Android phones in this room. And every one of those statements on the left is a negative, not a positive. So for example, working backwards, choose your own adventure to the Android user is, I get to pick whatever watch I want to wear. I don't have to wear your watch. Whereas the Apple customer is saying, I prefer everything to just be integrated. I don't want to have to make a decision. You give me what I want, it'll work for me, I'll be happy. Complexity versus simplicity, an extension of that argument. Or standard design and quality versus premium. One says expensive, the other one says affordable. These are examples of positioning in action. Whole Foods. What does everybody think when I say Whole Foods? Expensive. Yeah. Expensive. Expensive. We have another premium brand operating in a category that most people didn't think needed to be premium. Natural foods. So quality food versus cheap processed food. Experience focused versus generic shopping trip. So the experience focused is they actually have people who are giving you samples of wine or granola or some other nonsense that does not align with my values, but oh, that's wonderful. It's $10 for a bag of granola. And the expert staff is helping me. Well, again, it's positioning. And not everybody cares about that because they're catering to a very specific audience. Thus, they are able to charge a premium. Last one is Netflix. This is a company that, as we all may have forgotten, started by mailing people DVDs. And now they've become a home movie theater solution. So they are expertly positioned as giving you highly produced content in your home versus, let's put YouTube up for an example, UGC, user-generated content. Nothing wrong with user-generated content, but that's not where you go if you want that premium experience. They have an amazing recommendation engine so that you never click off their platform. And they want Hollywood to come to you. Their number one enemy is other screen-based entertainment, especially Regal Cinemas. That's pretty much their biggest competitor. Thus, they are able to continue to increase the price of their subscription service without seeing people drop off. That's positioning. Great brands, and they have a unique position. I will often say marketing an organization that doesn't have a unique position is practically impossible. I was very nice in my bullet point, and I said it's really, really hard. It's practically impossible to really market an organization that doesn't have a strong position. So let's go back to the definition of marketing: communicating your position with your audience. Communication does not just happen in these conversations, it happens digitally, but they both happen. Position, we always have to remember what makes us unique, better, and different. And then our audience, which we're not really even getting into today because everybody's audience is very, very different. But think of your audience as a target. You should really only ever care about the bullseye. Stop thinking about the target. Think about the middle. Okay, next section I want to talk about is what can it actually do for you, being properly positioned and properly communicating. There are 4 different powers that I have listed, and I'm going to give examples about each one of these. If we do these well, we're able to reach more people, we are able to charge a premium, reduce risk, and shorten sales cycles. And these are all things that we can define and calculate. So I have an example. We work with a design-build contractor in Covington, Louisiana, just across the lake from New Orleans. This was made about 2 years ago. We produced a piece of content that adhered to our strategy that had everything to do with strengthening relationships with existing owners, not going after new leads. That's not what we're trying to do. Well, produced a video as a 3-story self-storage facility, published it on LinkedIn, and the CFO of the company, Scott, he then reposted the story on his network. Well, the CFO gets a call, just moments later, basically, from a person he hadn't spoken to in years and said, hey, I didn't know you guys were doing projects this big, because he hadn't kept up and he hadn't reached out. But he communicated that message. They had a signed contract for a 6-story self-storage facility in New Orleans 2 weeks later. I say that to say this almost never happens. I would never say this is exactly what the playbook is going to be. This is the exception that proves the rule. Although it's an accelerated timeline of what happens when you can reach more people, instant validation through trust, and it shortened their sales cycle that much because they needed somebody that they could trust to get this thing rolling. The ability to charge a premium. So our data shows that premium brands in the following service-based categories, and there's more, are charging between 15 and 50% more. I will say it depends on the category, depends on the position, but effectively, no premium brand is ever charging less than the generic. And that is very, very important. I'm going to give you an example with the education space. This one's fun to me. I am not trying to pick on my Dukes. I love my JMU Dukes. But I want to point out something. Harvard University charges $87,000 a year and has an endowment of $53 billion. JMU charges $33,000 in-state and has an endowment of $219 million. So I'm always looking for numbers because they help us track progress. Now, Harvard, JMU, you would think, well, this is not a fair fight. I promise you, if you go look at their offerings, their courses, their majors, there is a ton of overlap. You can learn the same thing at JMU as you can at Harvard. But what does Harvard do? I'm going to oversimplify a little bit. Harvard specializes in having the most challenging acceptance rates for both their students and their faculty. That is their unique position. And what does that actually give them the power to charge? An extra, you could do the math. They can charge a heck of a lot more per year, and JMU's endowment is the rounding error of theirs. Now, it does help that they were founded in 1636 and they've been doing this just a little bit longer. Just a little bit longer. But it's not about sports. It's not about athletics. It's not even about TV time. They are just competing on insanely low acceptance rates for students and faculty. And if that's the position they want to have, that is what they get out of it. Oversimplified, but that is the point. Reduction of risk. I always think that the B2B sales funnel, the business development process, is a very complex transaction. And we would call it the dark funnel, which is private conversations and internal meetings are basically where people are going to get their first advice, their first source of advice. They're probably saying, hey, who do you trust in this space that can actually help me get this job done correctly? That referral in the dark funnel is incredibly important. And strong brands are going to be the first one that they actually, the people in those meetings are actually going to talk about. And the last one is the shortening of the sales cycle. And the Mandeville, Louisiana, well, they were in Mandeville, now they're in Covington. Covington, Louisiana example is helpful. But I would just say outbound leads require a lot more nurturing. Anybody who's done this long enough will know that. They require more time, and sometimes, if you're a large enough organization, that time requires you to have additional staff to deal with that. The ideal goal would be to shorten that sales cycle and objectively shrink it, because that will allow you to accomplish more work in the same amount of time. Okay, this is the workshop component. So I'm going to ask that everybody gets out their notebook and gets ready to write down some numbers. So this is positioning. I'm going to try and encourage us to reflect on who we are as an organization, write down your own assessment of who you are, and then I'm going to challenge you at the end to kind of come up with some ideas for how you can, what you can take action with after this presentation to make this, to strengthen your position. So there's a great book by Christopher Lochhead. He is a partner of us, why they call it Category Pirate. It's called The 22 Laws of Category Design. I am going to bring up 5 of these laws, and I'm going to define them in a couple of different bullets, and I'm going to ask us to reflect on how we achieve. So, and I'll go back to those. You don't have to write them all down or anything, but I like the 4-3-2-1 rubric. And the reason I like the 4-3-2-1 rubric is basically 4 is we're knocking it out of the park, 1 is we stink at this. Notice there's no room for average. You're not allowed to give yourself a 2.5, okay? It's the only rule. None of that, not right now, because I want us to either say we can improve or we're actually doing okay on that. So position yourself or be positioned. This is the first law I'd like to rank ourselves on. So I want you to say, I agree with the statement completely, like we're crushing it, or we need to work on it. My organization clearly explains who we are in relation to our competition by defining our unique position in the market. We actively communicate our distinct narrative so others do not define it for us. And we are the sole leader of a new category, not just a competitor in an existing one. Now, in purple at the bottom, I added just a very quick summary of what I mean by that. Design build contractor versus contractor. I know that seems like I'm splitting hairs on language. Design build contractor is a unique position in the marketplace versus I am a contractor. So rank yourself 4, 3, 2, or 1, please. Next question, or I should say law. Whoever frames the problem owns the solution. Oh, by the way, I highly recommend you buy this book. It's a lunch read. It's really, really easy. It's very, very, very simple. My organization correctly frames the customer's problem. So that means we have clearly framed a new unsolved problem for the market. We're seen as the authoritative source on the problem we've defined, and our solution is the natural and definitive solution, definitive answer to the problem we have framed. And I'll give you an example. Consulting engineer versus engineer. Meaning, the consulting engineer understands the true problem the customer has. They need a consultant to help them be guided through their problem. They don't need an engineer to do math. Very different things. So rank yourselves 1 through 4. Be different, not better. And I realize them's fighting words. I get that. This is kind of a bold idea. But my organization is different from our competitors. We are fundamentally different from the competition, not a slightly better version. We want to avoid competing on a feature-by-feature basis within an existing market, and we have introduced a new approach that makes the old way of doing things obsolete. An example, end-to-end turnkey service versus the piecemeal approach. Now, it depends on what you're doing, but the vision of an organization saying, I figured out what my customers want. They want to be guided from the beginning to the end of every single project, and that's what we're going to adapt our company to do. That is being different, not just offering the same services slightly better or slightly cheaper. The next law, the 4th law. Mercenaries capture value, missionaries create value. And this one is very interesting to me. So my organization approaches our role as a missionary. So our leaders are missionaries driven by a deep sense of purpose, not mercenaries focused on short-term financial gains. We're focused on creating a new category and expanding the market rather than just competing for a share of the existing market. And that is very, very important. Our vision is to create a new future, not just capture value from the present. My quote that supports the mercenary versus missionary position is, imagine you are a contractor who says, we view every project as an opportunity to save our customers time. We are on a mission to save them time. Not we are a mercenary who's going to charge the most and get the most out of this job. Because if we save our customers time, by extension, we will grow and accomplish A. But that's a mission, saving time. Last one. Legendary marketing plans are about creating a different future, not continuing the past. Sort of a different spin on a similar theme. So my organization is focused on changing the future. My organization is focused on creating a new future and convincing the market of a new way of doing things. We are interested in our marketing plan educates the public about a new and different category and its unique value proposition. And my organization's marketing positions us as the architect and leader of a different future. My example, customers need a partner who can handle any project regardless of size. That is a unique position and vision for the future, because not every organization would say, well, some organizations, that project is too tiny for us, we don't do that. And I'm not trying to pigeonhole them as saying that's a bad idea. I'm just trying to say this is an example of somebody saying a new and better future is us doing any project regardless of the size, because that's what the future needs. Here's our rubric. Would you mind adding up your values and totaling them? And then we're going to have a little reflection. Does anybody want to share their score? Jake wants to. 13. Oh, I'm going to go back. Sorry about that. 13. Anybody else? 12?
I had a 15 to 17.
15 to 17? Okay. Anybody else? Are we all within that BC range? In my opinion, that BC range is a little bit of a trap. We don't want to be there. So, what was your biggest surprise on, like, what was the thing that you would say, I'm kind of shocked by this?
I think for mine, I'm pretty new, but I couldn't communicate, or I couldn't nail down what the communication would be for some of those, like what our unique one would be.
Yeah.
You know, we have a long history, but like what, you know, so that's something that's fun.
I will say, almost everything we talked about here, other than our marketing supports, these are leadership level conversations. This is organizational. This is operational stuff. This is not really marketing stuff. But if we don't know our position, how do we communicate it? That's why I love that definition of marketing, communicating your position with your audience. You got to know who you're talking to. You have to be properly positioned, and you must figure out what your communication plan and strategy is. So,
I do wonder, how often do you think companies should perform some kind of diagnostic to make sure that we are engaging in these things and not just caught up in the business of being in business, like, oh, well, we do it, but are we being excellent? Not just in the middle ground.
100% agree. Positioning is something that should be revisited probably annually and not just set it and forget it and who cares what happens. And it's definitely at the senior leadership level. What do you think the biggest barrier to improvement is with your lowest score, whichever one that you scored the lowest on? I gave some examples. Lack of resources, leadership buy-in, fear of cannibalizing existing services. I could even say cutting off a revenue stream. That could be one too.
Yeah, like the example of we want to be able to do all kinds of projects. You could just spread yourself too thin, and now we're not excellent at anything.
Yep.
So I do think that's for especially subcontractor. Like that could be a real fear.
Anybody else? Any other ideas?
Leadership buy-in was a big one for us.
Leadership buy-in. Having your leadership all on the same page with what your position is, what it should be, it's kind of hard. I've been doing this for a while. I've been in a lot of meetings. I will tell you, it's kind of hard to get everybody on the same page. Here's the last bullet point is the question I really want to ask is, what's one tangible action that you can take this week to begin moving the needle on your lowest scoring law? What could you actually do? What kind of impact could you make?
I know one is just being aware of this conversation today. I can engage with marketing around and our chief revenue officer around how do we know what our positioning is?
Yeah.
And when have we done this last?
Figure it out. 100% agreed.
I was just asking some of the questions and just be like, it's interesting for me. I want to know what you would say. And I'm not in marketing all the time. So,
Sure.
So definitely, I feel like coming to them with something like this might be like, whoa. Stepping on our toes here or something.
Right. So you.
Kind of curious. Going with curiosity instead of like, this is what I learned.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Yes.
Just kind of like the exercise we went through, additional self-reflection from other business leaders within other departments of the company to kind of take everything and look at it from a more macro viewpoint.
Bringing people together to have this larger conversation.
Everybody may look at the company in a different position, kind of like we just did, depending on what the background is.
Yep.
Operational capacity that they have ownership of.
100% agreed. Positioning can accidentally become a set it and forget it. And it's not a good idea. It's really not a good idea. It should be assessed, measured, and looking at your competitive landscape. What have your competitors been doing too? Have they been positioning themselves around you? If it's a set it and forget it, you will not be paying attention at all. And again, I come back to marketing. Marketing is not advertising. Marketing is not sales either. That's another thing that we end up, in my seat, we end up working with a lot, going, marketing is not sales. Marketing is there to support business development. It's there to support sales. That would be the equivalent of working with a nonprofit and saying, I don't need to hire a fundraiser. We have marketing. No, you have a fundraiser who has relationships, who understands what your donors want. And how you're going to get there is by communicating what they want very, very well in a targeted approach. But it's not going to be, I ran some ads and I got my donations. It's not going to be, I ran some ads and we got our sales. It's just not the same. Marketing is there to support business development. But in my opinion, if you're not asking yourselves these questions, you might not be headed in the right direction. Yes?
Do you feel that marketing, I'm in sales, I'm not even a contractor, I'm in the P&C, property and casualty world. When we talk about points of differentiation, does your marketing message drive your points of differentiation for your BD, for your business development people? You see what I'm saying? Like when they're talking with prospects, aren't they sending the same message that your marketing is communicating as well?
The answer should be yes, absolutely. The marketing message should be, and I don't know that we're getting that off track, but I think your marketing message should be laser focused. The positioning for your organization in an ideal world should be known by everybody. Your mission, vision, values should be able to be stated by anybody in your company off the tip of their tongue. From sales perspective, the marketing message, the positioning should be known, and that should be deeply integrated into the integrated plan. Everybody should be marching to the beat of the same drum. And when the beat changes because positioning changes, then so does the march. All right, so I hope I'm not boring you by saying the same thing over again. We're going to leave the positioning world for a second. So I want to come back to our thesis. CAPEX, OPEX, we have our 4 rows. In this, this agenda, and this presentation, I believe that I have said they are split down the middle, 50-50, and I've ranked them. And this is what I believe that folks are ranking them based on their priorities. The brand is actually a long-term intangible asset that allows you to increase prices, shorten sales cycles, reach more people, all that fun stuff. It has an incredible long-term benefit, not a short-term benefit. That is the difference between brand marketing and performance marketing. How many clicks are we getting versus how do people feel when they see our logo, when they hear our name? When they're in their dark funnel conversation and somebody at the tip of their tongue says, oh, you got to go with Skyline Roofing. They're the best. That's more powerful than any ad you're ever going to run. Accounting, you cannot escape this. These are both operational expenses by the letter of the law. My argument is that we need to switch the priorities in how we rank these. My belief is that this long-term asset, number 1 and number 2, are the most important things. Number 3 and number 4 is accounting and tax treatment. You can't ignore the way that you put it on your expense reports, but the view, the gestalt of the entire purpose of marketing and branding is to build a long-term intangible asset that actually improves the bottom line, not subtracts from it. So the assumption, to close it out, marketing and branding expenses are unnecessary and subtract from the bottom line. I disagree with that. They command higher prices. They are not accidents. They're incredibly intentional, as understood just by even having a positioning discussion about how it is not an accident to have a very strong, unique position in the marketplace. And they start by being different, are clearly communicated, and constantly improved. It is hard work. If done well, it will help. So, thank you very much. I appreciate your time.